Now, my report to you last September reminded us that Southern Baptists are a force for good. It was a call to action based on our global partnership through the Cooperative program. Well, tonight's report will be different, although hopefully inspirational in a different kind of way. Tonight, I want to speak to you about 3 issues that are coming before the Executive Committee and are of general interest to all Southern Baptists. One of these issues is a report to you about recent actions. The other 2 are to help set the stage for decisions you as an Executive Committee will make tomorrow related to our work together. Let me begin by talking with you about sexual abuse prevention and response. At the SBC annual meeting last year, the Executive Committee was assigned the responsibility for determining the organizational placement of sexual abuse prevention and response in what I will call the SBC ecosystem. After considering multiple options, the Executive Committee assigned itself this responsibility. We then launched a national search for a director of sexual abuse prevention and response, resulting in Jeff Dalrymple joining our team in January 2025. Jeff Dalrymple is here this evening. Would you join me in recognizing him and thanking him for taking on this significant responsibility? Under Jeff's leadership, we are working on 6 initiatives to finalize before the annual meeting in June. At that meeting, we will then announce additional plans for the next year as we continue to build out the framework of abuse prevention and response. These current 6 initiatives include the following. Number 1, we are enhancing the Essentials curriculum and continuing to make it available free to all churches. We appreciate the ARTF creating the first version of this curriculum. Now that it's been field tested for almost a year, we're updating it, making it a more effective tool and streamlining its distribution and its availability. Second, I am appointing an advisory committee on sexual abuse prevention and response strategies. This committee will have a cross-section of people with a proven record of leading on these issues, serving cooperatively among Southern Baptists, and balancing the wide range of concerns related to prevention and response. Third, the Executive Committee has officially assumed operation of the SBCAbuseprevention.com website, and we are enhancing it and enlarging significantly what will be offered through that site. Fourth, we are pursuing ways to improve the SBC hotline, both improving its administration and the services we offer persons who contact it. And fifth, we are formalizing the network of state convention abuse prevention and response leaders. State conventions, as in every national effort by Southern Baptists, are vital partners who have direct contact with churches and church leaders. So we foresee a regular communication among this group as we identify each state convention's key leader and network customized responses through them in every state. And finally, we will be hosting a training event, Safeguarding the Next Generation, at the annual meeting in Dallas, along with raising the profile of abuse prevention and response with dedicated exhibit space in our booth area. This event will be an event that will require a small charge to participate. It will have a room for about 300 to register, so you'll be alert for that and do that when the time is right. In all of these things, the Executive Committee is taking measured, intentional, proactive steps toward establishing sexual abuse prevention and response as a ministry responsibility. Now, part of defining the nature of this response is understanding the scope of the problem among Southern Baptists. We now have one important data source, the hotline results, which inform our planning. While it is not our only data source, and I underscore that, it is a primary source of independently verified information. Here's what we've learned. The hotline has been operational since May of 2022. Since then, the hotline has received 1,008 contacts by phone and email. Of those 108 contacts, 334, or 33%, were requests for information or opinions or spam. The other 674, or 67%, reported alleged abuse. Of the 674 reported allegations, 458, or 68%, were among Southern Baptists, but 216, or 32%, were not among Southern Baptists. Of the 458 reported allegations among Southern Baptists, 187, or 41%, were adult-on-adult incidents, and 271, or 59%, were adult and minor incidents. Now, while these overall data points are significant for the total picture, it is important to note that 513, or 51% of the hotline contacts, came in the first 4 months the hotline was open, as would be expected, to account for a backlog of concerns. When we look past the surge at the beginning and isolate the data for the last 24 months, it provides a better picture of the ongoing reporting we are receiving. Over the past 24 months, that's from January 23 through December 24, the hotline received 315 contacts, an average of 13 contacts per month. When the percentages above are applied to these 13 monthly contacts, it means about 4 people requested information and 9 reported alleged abuse. Of those 9, 2 were likely not Southern Baptist. And of the remaining 7 contacts, 2 to 3 cases would involve adult-on-adult incidents, and 4 to 5 cases would involve adult and minor incidents. Of these 315 total contacts over the previous 24 months, the hotline referred 128 cases, just over 5 per month, to the Credentials Committee for consideration of whether a church is in friendly cooperation with the convention. The Credentials Committee has processed or is processing those referrals. 7 churches have been declared not in friendly cooperation and removed from the SBC based on their responses to the Credentials Committee on these issues. So, what does this hotline data mean? 2 broad conclusions. First, sexual abuse is a serious and real problem. And when it happens, it is devastating for the survivors, the church, the community, and every person who is involved. Survivor stories are particularly gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. Every church must make every reasonable effort to prevent sexual abuse and respond proactively when it happens. We are committed to these standards at the Executive Committee: no tolerance for abuse, and every church a safe place for the vulnerable. We also acknowledge the hotline data does not define the full scope of the problem. The explosion of child pornography, rising licentiousness across our culture, and the predatory nature of offenders means we must be ever vigilant. I say again, even one case is one too many. That's why we're taking the proactive steps I've already listed tonight and creating ongoing processes beyond resolutions and study committees to equip churches to protect the vulnerable. We can and we will do this together. The second conclusion, according to the hotline data, in the context of what I've just said, is that abuse is not frequently being reported in Southern Baptist churches. We have widely publicized this issue for the past 5 years and encouraged people to come forward with information and allegations. We now have verified third-party data from which we can draw information and develop strategies. While we fully acknowledge reported incidents of sexual abuse, we also reject the false narrative Southern Baptist churches are dangerous places for children, that Southern Baptist churches are protecting predators, and that Southern Baptist churches are uncaring in their response to survivors. The data indicates a continuing problem. 13 total contacts and 5 referrals per month are too many. But it also puts the problem in perspective among more than 12 million Southern Baptist and 47,000 churches. Now, some may twist my words, accusing me of minimizing the problem. That's simply not true. We are responding to the problem now and creating an ongoing response framework for the future. Thousands of SBC churches have already implemented prevention measures over the past 5 years, with 7 rare exceptions. Southern Baptist churches, even those contacted by the Credentials Committee, are cooperating to prevent abuse and address these allegations. Sexual abuse, no matter how few incidents are reported among 47,000 churches, is an evil we want stopped. The Executive Committee is working with state convention partners and entity partners to provide the resources, support, and training necessary to strengthen churches in this battle. And in those rare instances when a church refuses to respond appropriately, we will continue to declare them not in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention. A second issue that will be addressed tomorrow relates to the business and financial plan. One of the Executive Committee's responsibilities is receiving and responding to various motions and recommendations by messengers at each annual meeting. Counting the ones we will address at this meeting, the Executive Committee has processed more than 35 referrals since last June. Our role is to study each issue carefully and make the decision we believe best serves the overall mission of the SBC. Over the past 2 years, several referrals have related to various business and financial components of the convention and its entities. After considering them, it became clear that the best response, rather than piecemealing each one individually, was to incorporate an overall response through revising the SBC Business and Financial Plan. The Business and Financial Plan is a general statement of policies for the convention, its entities, and the Executive Committee. It is not a comprehensive statement of everything required, every law or rule that must be followed, or every business or financial standard that must be met. It is instead a general statement of convention expectations. The current plan is a dated and cumbersome document which, frankly, was not easily amendable. Revising it required a different approach than the strike-through and underline process often used to amend official documents. We've worked for months to produce a proposed revision involving the Executive Committee staff and officers, entity presidents, entity chief financial officers, entity attorneys, Executive Committee attorneys, and Executive Committee members. Here are 5 convictions or perspectives or goals which have guided us in creating the document you will consider tomorrow. First, Southern Baptists govern their entities by electing trustees who are expected to fulfill the business and financial plan. The convention does not govern its entities by messenger action, media pressure, or public opinion. Southern Baptists require, however, their boards and the presidents they supervise to account for their fulfillment of the business and financial plan and report those results publicly. We have enhanced those reporting requirements in this proposed revision. This first point is really the crux of the matter in the current debates about governing the SBC and its entities. The original SBC Constitution included these instructions, quote, "The convention shall elect as many boards of managers as in its judgment will be necessary for carrying out the benevolent objects it may determine to promote. To each board shall be committed during the recess of the convention the entire management of all the affairs relating to the object with whose interest it shall be charged. Since our founding, we have governed entities by electing trustees, or managers as they were called in 1845, and allowing them to lead the entities. While this system, like every human created system, has shortcomings, it is far superior to the alternative of attempting to run a multi-billion-dollar enterprise on motions, short debates, and rushed votes. The most important role of messengers is to elect trustees, people they trust, to do the work, the hard work of governing the entities. Another important role of messengers is surfacing ideas worth considering, which are then referred to appropriate boards of trustees for consideration. Any resulting actions can then be taken after reflective deliberation and careful decision-making. Second, the business and financial plan must emerge from the Constitution and bylaws of the convention. The proposed document underscores those connections by including those notations. Business and financial practices, like revealing proprietary information about the entities, cannot be demanded of the entities if it conflicts with their responsibility for fulfilling those legal obligations. Third, the business and financial plan must focus on general principles rather than specific methodologies. SBC entities vary widely, from an entity focused on public policy to 6 large seminaries, to a multi-million-dollar publishing company, to billion-dollar missionary enterprises, and to a multi-billion-dollar financial services company. All these entities have distinct legal, professional, financial, and accrediting standards they must meet. The business and financial plan must be general enough to encompass all of this, yet specific enough to accomplish its purpose. Fourth, the plan must call for transparency by the entities in their business and financial decision. The revised plan includes at least 15 instances where the Board of Trustees of each entity must report compliance in conjunction with their president. These include cooperative program promotion, board oversight of the entity, audit practices, use of restricted funds, reported indebtedness, conflicts of interest, budget oversight, presidential compensation, staff compensation, executive expenses, constituent responsiveness, fundraising practices, fundraising reports, and internal controls. Each entity will report on these issues in an annual accountability letter, which is described in the business and financial plan, addressed to Southern Baptists and reported or published in the convention annual. Finally, the revised business and financial plan uses plain language, not technical or legal language, unless necessary for clarity. We've also eliminated redundant sections and archaic practices, and in doing this, we were also able to shorten the document, standardize the language, and simplify the formatting. In adopting this new plan and recommending it to the annual meeting in Dallas, as an executive committee, you are not setting anything in stone. If we discover the deficiencies, the business and financial plan can be amended until we feel it is adequate for its purpose. My hope is that we will adopt the revised plan that's being recommended tomorrow, live with it for 2 years, and then start adjusting deficiencies and shortcomings as we find them. And now finally, the budget and financial challenges of the convention. Budgeting and resource management are 2 financial challenges the SBC and Executive Committee have faced in the past few years. Let me summarize how we arrived at this point, the current steps we're taking, and the plans we're proposing as to solve these problems. In 2021, the Southern Baptist Convention adopted a consequential motion with several components. First, the messengers commissioned an independent investigation of the Executive Committee's handling of sexual abuse allegations. Second, the Executive Committee was instructed to surrender attorney-client privilege related to the investigation. Third, the motion called for the investigation and its aftermath to be paid for with cooperative program funds. As the Executive Committee implemented this motion, the controversial subject matter, coupled with waiving privilege and significant pressure from some leaders, resulted in the Executive Committee indemnifying the investigator, Guidepost Solutions. These decisions were controversial at the time, resulting in resignations by Executive Committee members and Executive Committee staff. Some voices objected to cooperative program funds being used as included in the motion. The Executive Committee made a good faith effort to respond to those concerns and protect the cooperative program by paying the costs from their reserves, which were about $14 million at the time. Now, 4 years later, we know the financial cost of those decisions. Through December 2024, the Executive Committee has spent just over $13 million to fulfill the directives of the original motion and the results. To do this, the Executive Committee has reduced staff, now down to 22 full-time employees, cut programs, curtailed expenses, and spent its unrestricted reserves, which are now about $1 million. For the current fiscal year, the Executive Committee is working to secure a $3 million loan to meet its financial obligations. Looking ahead, we anticipate at least another $3 million in legal expenses next year as we defend against multiple lawsuits resulting from the decisions made in 2021. And since we cannot predict the outcome or timeline for these legal processes, we do not know the total legal expenses we may face over the next few years. But here's our present reality. Decisions were made by the messengers in 2021. Those decisions have consequences. Those consequences have costs. And those bills are due, and they must be paid. The pressing question then is, how do we fund an estimated $3 million in additional legal expenses in the 25-26 SBC and EC operating budgets? One possible answer is to sell the SBC building in Nashville. We are currently marketing the building for sale for $35 million. We do not know if or when the building will sell. However, we still must have a definitive alternative. For that reason, we're recommending a $190 million cooperative program budget for 25-26 with a $3 million priority allocation for SBC legal expenses and other costs associated with that original motion. This is a controversial and difficult recommendation to make. No mission-centered Southern Baptist wants to take this action. I don't. You don't. No one does. But we have exhausted other definitive options. We have used the Executive Committee reserves. We have cut staff and programs. We have borrowed money, and we are attempting to sell our building. We have reached a point where the instructions from the original motion must now be implemented, directly paying for the investigation and its results with cooperative program funds. If this budget recommendation is adopted, however, some pastors may consider redirecting their cooperative program gifts because they say, quote, "I don't want my CP going to pay legal bills." I'm going to speak to pastors now. And I hope you'll consider these next observations as you make your decision on this issue. First, paying legal bills with cooperative program funds is not a new practice. Our current situation is just more public than most. All SBC entities and state conventions employ attorneys or contract with law firms to represent them. We live in a litigious world, and it's only getting worse. We have always paid, and we will continue to pay indefinitely into the future legal costs of doing business in this culture, and those payments will be made with cooperative program funds. Second, the ethical dilemma for Southern Baptists is not centered on using funds to pay legal bills, but keeping our word and paying our debts. While the messengers who voted for the investigation may not have understood the full cost of their decision, and most Southern Baptists were not in the room when the vote was taken, the resulting bills are in our name, Southern Baptists, and they must be paid. Third, the Executive Committee is defending the SBC in all these legal actions. We have never initiated any legal action against anyone. We are defendants. We are defending the SBC, the Executive Committee, SBC officers and personnel. We cannot control who sues us, but for the sake of our mission, we, the Executive Committee, are provided with the responsibility of providing a robust defense when lawsuits are filed against us. Fourth, we are spending a small fraction of SBC resources on legal expenses. Southern Baptist churches will receive more than $10 billion with a B in offerings in 2025. They will forward about $450 million of that through the cooperative program and give another $275 million to SBC mission offerings and causes. While $3 million seems like a lot to most Southern Baptists, it is a relatively small part of our overall financial resources of $10 billion that's being held by our churches, being used by our churches. Despite these perspectives, I'm still asked if we can push through this challenge and return to a more resolute focus on our mission in a few years. My answer is an unequivocal yes. And I say that for two reasons. First, I believe God is still using Southern Baptists as a force for good, and He will sustain us. And second, I say yes because I believe in Southern Baptist pastors. Southern Baptist pastors do not run from trouble. They walk toward it. They specialize in holding steady in messy situations, especially those caused by the choices of others. On a local level, pastors step into church conflicts, marital strife, family dysfunctions, and community turmoil. And on a national level, they step forward to support their leaders in solving serious problems. As our president has already alluded to tonight, our current financial and legal challenges are not the first time Southern Baptists have faced major public challenges. In the 1920s, both our mission boards discovered embezzlement by their treasurers of more than $18 million in today's dollars. Seminaries have paid to terminate employees and recover financially after dealing with theological drift in the 60s and the 80s. We have made poor decisions on civil rights and racial issues to our public shame, with resulting financial losses like withdrawing or reprinting curriculum or having to recover with other financial repercussions. And we've had to fire a few entity presidents along the way and clean up the financial mess that left and repair the financial setbacks to the entities involved. In all these cases, over these last 100 years, Southern Baptist pastors have held steady in their giving, bore the embarrassment of public failure, trusted their leaders to fix the problems, and ultimately emerged on the other side with reforms, changes, and newfound wisdom about doing our work together. And I believe Southern Baptist pastors will stand up and do it again. Over the past few weeks, I've asked God with a bit of a wry smile, with at least 12 million other Southern Baptists available, why did He assign me to make this speech tonight? I'm not sure of all the reasons, but in God's providence, here we are. This is not how I envision this season of my life. I am frustrated by reading legal briefs, consulting with attorneys, and paying legal costs. I am saddened. I live in a world where I must spend time developing strategies and spending money to stop sexual predators. And I get angry when enemies and critics, especially other Southern Baptists, spread misinformation and sometimes outright lies about us. Some days, getting on with retirement looks pretty good. But then I remember the overwhelming good Southern Baptists are accomplishing through our churches, colleges, seminaries, retirement centers, children's services and crisis pregnancy centers, collegiate ministries, camps, conference centers, state conventions, associations, state foundations and the SBC Foundation, Sunday schools, vacation Bible schools, Bible and curriculum production, retirement services, benevolent care for ministers, and public advocacy. And of course, as already been mentioned, the largest international missionary force and the largest domestic church planting movements in the United States. My friends, I said it last time, I'll say it again tonight. Southern Baptists are still a force for good. Amen. Some critics persistently claim we are corrupt and the entire Southern Baptist enterprise needs to be dismantled. Well, they are wrong. All that's required to keep that from happening in this generation is thousands of Southern Baptist pastors and other leaders like those of us in this room tonight standing up and saying, "Not on my watch." I signed on to guide us through these current challenges. And that's where I'm going. Not around these problems, but through them. My hope is the leaders in this room, thousands of pastors who will hear this speech, and millions of Southern Baptists will resolve to go through this together. Southern Baptists are still a force for good, and may God bless us as we go through this season together.